Okay, here we are. This is Spotlight Studio, and we have the whole premise behind Spotlight Studio is to allow um, authors to learn and to provide valuable information for authors to use to keep those books selling, because we know how much work it is to write a book. It's not for the faint of heart. This whole process is not for the faint of heart. There is so much to do. Our focus in this show on Author Spotlight is to make sure that you bring your works of wisdom, your heart, your soul, and weave storytelling into what you're bringing to the world. And there's a lot of wonderful tools and tips that make this possible. Our two guests today is author Dr. Joseph Blake and Bruce Jones. Bruce is our resident expert. He has done a lot of things. I will in the publishing world for many years, and I will put him in the background so we can have the interview with Dr. Joseph Blake just for a moment. But what we do with the show is we showcase our authors, and we have one author for each show that we showcase, and to learn what their book is all about, learn what they bring to the world, how they're being an impactful influencer in the world, and our expert showcase. So
okay. Well, it's wonderful to be able to share information like this. How we keep our
and
our
with the
books
expert show. Thank you, Dr. Joe. So, Dr. Joseph, you wrote a book that was very beautiful. And I even did a cover for it, and I'm not sure if it's even going to show. Let me see if this. There we go. So, Dr. Joe, tell us about your book. I think you probably have it. You always showcase it when we're meeting with each other. And today's the day you're not doing it.
I have it right over there. Yes, the cover. I love the cover myself, and what I like about it is they give you a little description. My chair. My wife likes to decorate. Um, the cover, Joseph. There's the guy in the Bible named Joseph. Not really my name. Well, it is my name. It just happens to be Joseph. In the book, the bricks in the background, the pyramid bricks from Egypt. So what I'm doing is I'm building the thought of financial literacy for the generations in the family's lives. So the thoughts that we're creating for building financial wealth is generational wealth in the lives of those readers that are getting the book and purchasing it. So we're generating that financial wealth, generational wealth for years to come in a family's life. So that was the foundation for creating that cover, and that's what I want. That's what I'm creating. And this is the first book of three others that I'm going to write for my readers.
That's awesome. So, Joe, what prompted you to bring a book like this to the world?
Mainly dealing in my business. I've been an investment advisor for 27 years now. And over that time, I did a lot within the nonprofit world and the faith-based community, sitting down with other members in the body of Christ, and not only just in the body of Christ, also and out seeing other clients, and I just developed and saw things, and I wanted to know why it was causing like Christians and non-Christians not to move forward in like investing in building wealth. And part of my doctoral studies, when I received my PhD, I actually went to three different churches. One was African American, one was Latino, and one was Anglo. And I went to each location. I spent like 2.5, 3 months at each place, and I did my research there. And I interviewed folks at each location, and I wanted to find out what was, causing those Christians to get stuck. But when you go to a church, you can't really just walk up and, just, hey, tell me about your money. But I
You
got
have to build a
permission
few
from the pastor.
relationships there to make that happen, right?
Yes, I sure did. I had to build relationships and get permission from the pastor. So that information I put in my dissertation and was published in an article in the academic magazine. I won a Distinguished Paper Award, and from that Distinguished Paper Award, then I developed my first book and insights for the follow up to this book that I'll probably do within the next year or so to get out to everyone as well.
That's awesome. So what was your process when you decided that you wanted to bring a book to the world? Um, what did you learn from that experience, and what was your process that you did to actually get it written? How did you go about doing that?
Well, it was I met you first of all, and
And
because
that's
I
a
have a
good thing.
yeah, it was a good thing, and I mean that's a whole nother story in itself. Because actually, I went dissertation in 2013, so I already had that. But I met you a few years later, and God told me to write the book, but I took a couple of years before I actually wrote the book. And God always tells you to do something, but when you half step, so to speak, and God said, "Hey, did I tell you to do that?"
Did I tell you to do that? Why
Yeah, I
didn't you do
told you to. And
it?
sometimes when we kind of, you know, drag feet, God reminds us we need to do something. So if you're out there and you have a book that you need to write and you need to write it, the first step you got to get on it and get it done. And so I had to come to my own senses and know that I need to write the book. And that's the first step I had to come to the realization. Okay, let's get this done, Joe. So since I already had my dissertation, I already had the product. So I had to do my best to get the product, get it in the format where I had to do my best to get all the doctoral language out of it, and you had to work with me on that.
Process. Yes. We had a lot of conversation around gotta tell some stories. The story is the important part in the
Yeah,
book because it's the fiber of that connection that
right,
we
right.
have with those that are going to read, make it
Yeah.
relatable.
Yeah, right. And so that's when I added my family, my background in it. Because the book is dedicated to my mother. I grew up in the inner city in Baltimore, Maryland, uh, and so I put stories in there for my mom because my mother, I was on welfare when I was a little kid, and it was a short period of time, but it may seem like it was forever. But there's a story, the things that my mom went through and brought me out of that allowed me to go back in life and get those stories and to see where I am now and write it within the book because there's some folks that have never been on welfare to see what a food stamp is, to go from having a food stamp and to be where I am now. My mother never had a driver's license, never owned a car, and well, she helped buy cars, like four of them. But I have a Tesla now, so that's like rode on the bus all the time as a teenager to driving the Tesla. It's night and day, and so you got to
Right.
be able to have that mindset to go from a welfare mindset to driving a vehicle like that. So how do you have to change?
So the change for you, I know some of your background because we're in the same networks meetings, and we do a lot of networking together. Your story, because you served in the military, and you said that you
Yes,
have always talked about how that was life changing for you, gave you a whole fresh and new,
it did.
incredibly different perspective on life.
Yeah, it did. Because I was in the military for about 13 years. Um, I started out in Maryland. Then I went overseas to England. Then I went to Arkansas. Then I saw last year's here at Luke, and it helped grow me up, so to speak. And even though I have finance in my background, I've been doing that for so long. I started out as a military firefighter, of all things. So firefighting and finance, you may think is far From me. But they're financial fire. I mean, they're firefighters, and then there's financial fires. But I'm still helping people. But that transition helped me understand that uh, people still are in need, and they still need help. And so I'm rescuing people still, but from a different standpoint now. And I like that. What it does for is um, when it comes to, fighting fights and helping people, it doesn't matter what they look like, what they sound like, where they come from. People still need help. I'm still there to help them to do that. And I have no fear at all when it comes to helping someone.
Well, you really shine as an example of that, and it's been remarkable because from a situation you had a wonderful mother, but you did grow up in difficult
Yeah.
environment that way, and she was also a single mom, I think, too, wasn't she?
Yes, it was. My mom was a
Yeah.
single mom, and tough girl, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in the publishing process, when you came time to for the book launch, what was that experience like for you?
It was wonderful because you got a chance to interview my kids, and they're all adults now. So all my children have a mixed family. 'Cause my wife is Latino, and they're all adults. 40, 33, no, 32, 31, 29. They all have advanced degrees. The oldest master degrees. My two sons are embarking on PhDs. They have good jobs. My daughter, my baby girl, she's a company commander in the army. So they're all doing well. Three out of four. Two out of four have no. 3 out of 4 have their homes, their own homes. So
That's wonderful.
yeah, and now I taught them all principles about finance and their clients. So they understand what it means to build wealth. So even though dad's got money, and when I'm gone, they're gonna get their own inheritance and everything, but they got their own. I
Right.
showed them how to do it as well. So
You led by example.
yeah, and they're working on their education because their thing is to beat dad.
The only way.
Yeah, it's okay though. I want them to do that. My mother never finished. My mother didn't finish high school, but I finished it for her. And every time I graduated, I put my cap on my mother's head. And she passed away right before I got my PhD, but she knew I was doing it. And I wanted to. When I do things, I do it because my mother. My dad is still around. My dad is still there. I call that dude all the time. And he calls me. So, but my mother is like a driving force for me. So,
That's awesome. Well, I feel so blessed because I know you became a number one best-selling author,
yes,
and I did have incredible fun in getting to meet your children over Zoom, and they were so proud of their dad for getting this book done, and we had some really cool conversations. I think your one son was in Italy, or is he still in Italy?
he's still in there. He's still there.
Yeah, so clear from Italy, we have this amazing launch day discussion with all of your kids.
Yeah, and that discussion from Italy is something else because he was. That's my baby daughter. My granddaughter was born. She's a year old now too, and with her being a year, she's walking now.
It's at different times.
Yeah, in different time zones. So it's interesting. We have 5 grandkids now, so and it's something else. We're able to talk to the grandkids, and I had 5, so I knew you have to get more, but
Very cool. So, what would you say to somebody who is thinking about authoring a book right now, or is in the process of putting that together? What would you say to them?
do it.
Do
Yeah, yeah, do it because like I held off for a while because I was like, well, even though I had my dissertation done and it was already book form, I drug my feet, and like I said, God told me to do it. and I think what I had was really worth for everyone else. Um, but after, when I showed up at the networking meeting and you were there, and it was like God was like, "See, I told you. Look at that. You got a publisher right there. There she is."
Yeah.
I had no excuse, and then after I did it, I felt so much better. And then I had some of my readers, read it, and then they gave me feedback for it, and they said, "Thank you. That was awesome. It was an awesome read." And they learned something from it. And then the stories that I wrote about my mom in here and my me growing up, and they said it was funny, and they laughed at it, and they learned from it. So that made me feel good. And I
That's
was glad.
awesome.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? I'm glad I wrote that. So write your
Well,
book.
write your book, yes. And thank you for what you bring to the world, Dr. Joe. You always have that gentle and kind spirit, but you do a lot to bring, you do have your own interviews. I think you have a live podcast show that you do on Saturdays, and you bring a lot to the world, and you do a lot of interviews. I've been on your show, so that's been really
Yes.
cool. So it's all the things that we can do to bring our wisdom, our expertise, our stories to the world and stand up as an impactful influencer. And that's what's important right now in our world. There's a lot of change happening. And
Mhm.
if the more of us that can shine the light and stand strong, that's all the better for our world.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, and I
So if you
appreciate
want to
you
get
having me on.
So below is in this on the little banner here. If you want to pick up a copy of Dr. Joe's book, follow that link. And Dr. Joe, proud of you, and I'll be waiting for those next two books to come along.
All right then, Becky.
All
Have a
righty.
good one.
Thank
Hmm.
you too. Bye bye. Okay, so now we're going to be taking just a little bit of a break, and we're going to bring on Dr. J. Bruce Jones, and we're going to be talking about how to keep those books selling. It's one thing to write a book. It's another thing to publish a book, and it's all quite a process. But keeping that book selling and using it as a tool for business growth is something that is an absolute must. Back in just a minute. All right, we are back to the show and so excited because this is a time when we have some very, very frank conversations about bringing our books to the world in impactful ways and making sure that they're used as a tool for business growth. Now, I've known Bruce. How many years have we known each other now?
6 maybe.
I think 6 years.
I'm going to say 6. I think it goes back to we probably met at the original one of the MML conferences in San Diego, probably,
Right?
and
Yes.
and then through our networking groups and things like that, we've gotten to know each other pretty well from just every other week conversations that we have.
Yes, and we're in a publisher mastermind together. We do when COVID's not hitting us, we once a year typically get together for a wonderful, amazing retreat. But Bruce, introduce yourself and kind of give a little bit of your background. What's interesting is I think I'll pick up that part of the interesting part of all of this after you introduce yourself. But give our listeners an idea of what you're all about and how you serve the world.
So I have been a graphic designer for years. I started at 30 and opened my own graphic design business. And so now I'm 66. So 36 years I've been doing that. And so that's been the bulk of it, of what I did, is business graphic design. And through that process, I started creating my own products and my own books. And I'm, as a lot of graphic designers are, as I'm dyslexic. And so writing is a challenge, but I just persevered, and it had been a goal of mine. I sort of set my life goals at 5 years old. You know, everybody has, what is your earliest memories? For me, it was sort of setting that I wanted to create books, make products, and own my own business. And so I've done all those things. And so it was always part of the goal, and I just kept pursuing it. And around 53, I just really was pursuing it, and then had a breakthrough that sort of let words fall out of my fingers. And from that point on, I just started creating and writing books on lots of different topics. And I do have the skill set because of being a graphic designer, but I just love writing books. I wrote one this weekend. Just finished two. We're trying to learn, and part of the process of creating books sometimes, because of I teach a lot of people. I have a large Facebook group called How to Publish Your Book, where I help and teach people to do that. And a lot of it is learning new skills, and one of them is learning some of the new things that are on the KDP Amazon. So to do that, I need a book. And so I said, well, I have to write a book. So I just put the book together.
Mm-hmm. And you know, the publishing houses keep changing. They have so much that as publishers of books, we have a lot of constant learning to do to keep abreast with what's going on. So what's interesting with Bruce is he started many years ago. He's still selling them like hotcakes today. He did a map series of mapping the world, and I homeschooled my two children.
There's the newest one they're as coloring books, they're as clip art, they're as t-shirts. They use them for all kinds of different things. So,
well, when I homeschooled, I know that I purchased his map books, and I taught my daughters learned their geography that way. Yeah. We did a lot of in-depth study, and what we would do when we were studying a certain country, we would learn about the culture, and we would make outfits to match the culture. We would cook meals, and we really do a lot of things to really help them to get a real sense of feel of what the world was all about. And we had a big basketball pad on our property, and so they would go out and they would use chalk and draw out their maps and where the capitals were and all of that. So it was a really interactive learning process. It was pretty fun, but we use, interestingly, and they're in their mid-30s, so I would say
you've been doing it
for a long time.
But I drew every one of the maps that are in all of my books and my software. And in fact, there's a source one. There's a source map that I use from the CIA, and retraced these maps into stuff like this. But what was fun about them, I love maps, and what was fun about them is in my mind, I would sort of travel to these places. I'd be sitting there in Idaho, or I'd be sitting there in Germany, or, Cambodia, or wherever it is, as I'm drawing, redrawing these maps. And this is actually didn't realize this was in here, but somebody had pointed out I had an error in where I put Frankfurt, which is one of my key things that I do recommend in all of my books. Is use your book as a tool, but put your contact information in your book so people can find you. And it has resulted in additional products because somebody will reach out to me from my books. I also get emails from people telling me that I used the wrong Frankfurt. And that's how I correct my maps, because I've drawn so many of them. So that's one of my key tips, is put your contact information in your books, because your books are tools to use for not just the book, but for your other services and products and things like that. So,
I had an author she was publishing her own books, and she was at a lot of our events early on when we would go back and forth to San Diego. And we learned about the whole, get your book out to the world. And she was a fiction writer. And what this lady did was in the page, she started this series, and she has, I think the last I heard, there's like 23 books in the series. Wow. But what she did is put her contact information in there and created an opt-in type of form in the back so people could communicate with, and she could send out emails to, and she would ask her readers, which character would you like to see expanded on in the next book series, and what would you like to see kind of the plot be? And that gave her the juice, the food to start that next book, and it's kept going. And people love her book series. So
great idea.
She was brilliant.
Like it's like she flipped the fan fiction books, which are many authors, usually in the sort of the fantasy market, but lots of other ones release their characters, and there are websites that about what the author will release, but they release their characters to the world because their fans are so into them. They want to write their own books, but they want to extend the books. And the smart authors say, yes, go for it, because you're building this sort of base of raving fans around your book topics, and it doesn't take anything away from your book, and it just extends it everywhere. But that technique is that's a great idea too, of like, tell me where you want to go, what do you want to do next, and you can do that in your books, you can do that on your blogs. There's lots of places you can build that community of people. But
the other thing that I've been doing with my authors, and they're really liking it. In fact, I have an author that'll publish in June, and I've been telling them, okay, make videos for each chapter, and they don't have to be long, maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes at the longest. And they upload them to YouTube, and then we create the QR code for it. So a person can just use their phone, they take a picture of it, and they snap to life, and they're talking. And what that does is suddenly this book becomes interactive. A reader, especially if it's like a business book or whatever kind of book it is, the reader gets a whole different viewpoint of who the author is. And if it's a tool for business growth, then they know that they're going to want to work with that individual, and they can tell what they're bringing to the world.
So do they just give like the key points of each chapter? Like, here's what you'll learn in this chapter, or?
Each one is different. Most of them will give extra little pointers, give a little story to weave into it.
And feed a story in. And the QR codes at the back end of the chapter, right? You just put it you just put it there on the page.
Typically, yes. Some of them like it at the very beginning because they want to introduce the chapter. So it depends on the author. And I have one book launching on Monday. It's called Outwitting the Manipulator. And she had a lot of little scenarios that she was trying to describe in the written word. So with each scenario, she put a video. And so this nice, a little QR code opens up, and they are speaking. And
what a great idea. And you could also put a little screenshot of the video next to the QR code, so you know this is the video. Like
typically, they did the QR codes themselves. Typically, I do it for my authors, and so I can have that because there's the QR code maker that I have is able to take that snapshot of what they're taking and put it in the center of the QR code. Theirs wasn't done that way, and by the time I realized they were going to do their own QR code,
there's a little technical stuff going on.
I'm like, okay, we won't talk about that.
There's a wonderful book. I don't know if it's a little dated now or not, but there's an author, Johnny Truant and Sean Platt, they're a writing team, and they write sort of science fiction fantasy books. And they wrote a book called Write, Publish, Repeat, and it is about how to move people from your book 1 to your book 2 to your book 3, and how to feed people through that process to get them to be ready for that next book. It's really well done. They have a writing team where one of them writes the outline and the other one fills in the details. So they work together as a writing duo. Awesome. It's a really interesting combination, and but I recommended this book for years since it's come out, because it really helps you understand how you flow people from book to book to book to book. And but I love the queue. I know this is my new book. I'm going, oh, I should just, well, you know, the advantage of print on demand that we have with KDP is we hear a great idea like that, we can go back and fix this. Like,
well, yes, and that's what I offer for my authors when they get their second and third books. I go back to the first one and link to the second. Put those other links into the other books and re-upload it. Which on print on demand now you can do that,
right?
And then I keep it going like that, so that when they maybe have 5 books that they've published, each book refers to the other book, and it is it's extra work, but it's so great. It's great for the authors because then it's serving more of a purpose, and the reader, if they like what they're reading, they're going to come back for more. They want to know that there's more.
Right. Are they different QR codes for every chapter?
Yes.
Or each one's unique. It's unique to that particular video. You don't have to go to the channel. You go there. So I do the same thing. I do this where, and I teach, put your other books in the back. So this is one of my children's book series. Put your books in the back so that people realize, oh, I have other books. And so you can put the whole series in the back of your book. Or if you have a book like this book, which is a blank sheet music book, people will write 4 or 5 songs. This has enough pages for 4 or 5 songs in it because it's sheet music book. They're not always aware where they got this book.
Where did I get that thing?
Where did I buy this book? Where did I get it? And if you just, all you have to do is in the back of the book, just tell them where they got the book. Especially if they become comfortable with the book. So this book sells multiple times. People buy multiple copies of it. But you're not always aware of how 6 months from now, you go, where did I get this book? I don't know where I got it. I'm assuming Amazon, but maybe I got it somewhere else. And so you're just helping the reader find they can do it again if it's
absolutely. And the cool part about all of that is that then as you write, you're able to not only tap into a much greater depth of being able to keep connected with people, but you can even put in opt-ins in the book where you're building a mailing list, because with Ingram Spark, with Amazon, you don't know who's buying your book unless they come back and leave a review, but still you don't know who that person is really. And this way it makes it so much more interactive and a real tool instead of just, okay, here I am, and it's a one-hit wonder type of thing.
Right. There's a podcaster, internet marketing person, but more podcaster, Paul Culligan, who, if anybody's in the internet,
I remember him.
Yeah, so he's been around a long time in the internet marketing world, and he wrote a number of books. One of them was on YouTube tips. I think it's 21 YouTube tips or something like that. And what he did, and it's so easy with a book like this, which is a how-to book, or any book that's like that, along with what Becky's talking about, is he put all the technical information on YouTube, and the book was sort of the overview information. And then he tied them both directions. So on YouTube, in the description, and it's one of the areas that people just don't take advantage of, but you can put 5,000 characters and any kind of link you want in the description on YouTube. So he would say, here's the tip on, I don't know, how to use better lighting in your videos, and the details below, and a link to the book is below. And then the book did exactly what you did, some kind of a QR code or the URL link to the video. So they supported each other, and you had this sort of living book that has a book component and a video component. And this is a technical thing in the book. Let me go see the how-to demonstration is on YouTube. And YouTube videos sit out there for years. And it's just a wonderful way of taking any kind of how-to business, growth, any kind of book like that. But you can certainly do it with fiction too.
Well, when I first meet an upcoming author, the questions that I ask them, number one, the first question is why? Why are you doing this? What's your big why? But then who is the book being written for? And what material do you already have a course? Okay, you have a lot of content put together already. If you don't have a course, can you write a course that will support this? How about let's add a journal or a workbook? And talking about your music books, there's the Leader's Success Journal right there. That's a 90-day journal. But the person whose book this is, Iman Kay's book, and it has questions and it's plenty of room to journal. It's a really elegant looking journal type of book.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way he trains those who follow him, every 90 days they got to be buying another book, which I think is really brilliant.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine who did that with, he got type 2 diabetes, and he was sort of my office partner. We were office partners for years, and he watched me make all these books, and he just was like, I don't know what Bruce is doing. He's just doing his thing. And then he gets type 2 diabetes, and part of what you have to do is you have to record everything. So he was like, how do you make those journals? So he made a journal, a diabetes journal, and on the advice I had given him, the 3-month thing. That's a good time length. It makes for a decent length. The book feels about right, but
it's not too thick.
It's not too thick. It's not too cumbersome. You can put it in your backpack, or your pocketbook, or whatever you need to do with it. And again, he gets the repeats, because every 3 months you have to keep doing this. This is sort of a constant thing that you have to do, and you've built in obsolescence basically into your book. That I'm all done. Where do I get that? You go to the back of the book. Oh, I get it at Amazon. Great. You go order another one, and people get comfortable with what they're filling in and how your system. That's basically what they're doing. So
I have a gentleman just starting with me. He's doing. He's been in the medical profession for a long time, and he has observed so many of especially they're the backbone of with COVID and all the things that has been experienced in this past year. So his series is healing from burnout, recovering from burnout, from being in those situations. So what we did, it was just going to be one book. And I said, well, wait a minute, let's take a look at this, because he has really gone the extra mile, because he has worked with artists. So each page has an artist. I mean, it's a real work of art, an artist drawing, usually in watercolor or whatever. And then his quote for the day and his thoughts about why he, how to develop. And so now we have them in 3 months. We have 4 3-month, but he's got not just the book, but he has a workbook. He has a deck of cards. He has a calendar. And we're doing, all the infrastructure around it. He has it in hardcover for those that really want the elegance with the embossments and everything. And then a paperback and the workbook to go with it, and the Kindle version. And everything links to one to the other. So it's been a lot of, he started talking to me probably July, and he's just getting ready to get started. He's finally got the editing done. He's bringing it to me. So we're going to space the launches to where they're, kind of once every 3 months, to keep that series going and make each launch a bestseller, and then be able to sell it as a box set.
Yeah, I can say to people now, I taught one of my courses I have is Workbook Mastery, and I teach that the way you get the gold out of your book is to create a workbook with it. And the advantage of a workbook is you may charge $19.95 for your book, but you can charge $47 or $69 or $97 for the workbook, because the workbook is where you show the value of your lessons and gives people a thing to do. And either you, like any kind of how-to business, as I said, that this whole class of sort of nonfiction books, you're solving problems in each chapter. Well, there are questions you can ask at the end of the chapter. You can take those questions and pull them out and create the workbook with it. Usually pretty simple. I mean, you don't have to be very complicated. It can be the question in some lines. It can be a pretty simple. I was just looking here. I have a stuff that I'm doing later. Where's the? Yeah, it can be a very, very you can have pages that sort of look like this if you really just want to be really simple about it. But it's a great way to pull the value out of it and give your reader a lot more with that book and then add all those other
Yes.
products into it. And,
Yeah.
it's a great
So I think, we are truly blessed to live in a time like this. I've said so many times to individuals that were kind of complaining about COVID that, well, if it had happened 10 years ago, where would we be? Even 15 years ago, where would we have been? But look at the tool sets that we have available to us. And it has really transformed our world in a lot of ways, because we've had to get creative about how do we get our message out to the world? How do we stand up and shine despite and in spite of all that's going on? And we have the tool sets. We're able to use this platform to get our message out. We're able to, and it doesn't take an arm and a leg, whereas before it would have.
It might take a new router.
It took me a new router, and it still didn't work very good this time.
I often recommend. What I will say is that the barriers to entry have fallen in 5, and now I have 6 of them. So it's fallen in publishing, marketing, advertising, publishing, and distribution.
Absolutely.
Publishing is YouTube. I mean, we can, before you had to sort of be connected to NBC or CBS or CNN to get your message out. Now all we do is just this, and we are basically global broadcasting. It's all up to us how much we want to spread it. Publishing, print on demand, advertising and marketing. We have all the social media tools. Distribution is print on demand. I think that's how I call it, is that we have instant printing in places. As the self-publishing or independent person, we don't need inventory. We don't need warehouses. We don't need shipping. We don't need e-commerce. We don't need any of that stuff. It's all taken care of for us. And then what you're talking about, which I think is the new one, is the Zoomification, is that our audience is now accepts learning in this way, where before it was a lot of resistance. People said, I don't want to go on Zoom. I don't want to do this. But now to be part of the world, to join the world, we have to do this in some manner. And that has opened up not only tools for us as the creators, but means to get to people who want to see our stuff, because now they're willing to look at it and engage in this manner. And so that's a huge change. And that's really the result of this past year.
I think of how things have evolved even in the last 6 years since you and I met. And, like this platform we're using StreamYard. StreamYard can go to your Facebook, my Facebook, your YouTube, my YouTube. It goes to e360TV, which what we're broadcasting on. Right. They say it can go to LinkedIn. I haven't been able to make that work.
I haven't got that to work yet either.
And it can go other places. It just go where your people are, and it has made the world at our fingertips, because I have clients in Israel, I have clients in Canada, I have clients in Australia, New Zealand, and all over the US. And I met with a gentleman the other day he has a media group that is I'm offering his services to my authors, and we'll be interviewing him soon. But he's in Israel. He's raising 5 kids. He's a young dad. 5 kids, and they're all at home under quarantine again, and it's like we're in each other's living room almost, being able to have a conversation. And this is how my whole business is I meet on Zoom or on StreamYard, right? And
and the other thing
how blessed we are
is we haven't figured out yet how to get it to LinkedIn. I've been thought the same thing, but all we have to do is take our YouTube feed and stick it on LinkedIn. So we get the advantage of the live, but we also, in fact, most people don't really watch us necessarily on the live show. They watch us on the repeats, which allows us to have some time to sort of stick it in all these places.
That's a brilliant point, because, we have so much available to us, but I can see that, this is really our first show because we had issues the first time we did it. So, and that's the internet connections and all that other stuff that we have to watch out for. But the show will be dispersed in many other ways, and it will be seen. It can even be seen 2 years from now, because this is also streaming live to YouTube. In a couple of weeks, when my app is done, it will stream right live to my app, where my authors are able to instantly access it when they're ready to, not on my time frame.
StreamYard gives you the option, and many other programs, Zoom does this too. you can download the video file. You can also download the audio file. So
absolutely. There you have a podcast.
You have a podcast, and especially if you're doing it in a format of a show like this, you had a beginning, you had an end. It has a nice wrap, and it's all wrapped into one. It isn't just sort of random conversations. There's a flow to it. That's a podcast, right? And podcasts are just growing and growing in popularity. And you can put it up there. The other thing I wanted to say too was, I broadcast most of my shows. I use StreamYard, and I broadcast through Facebook, and I have built this large Facebook group around publishing. Is within seconds, the broadcasts are international, and I really encourage people to build a group, but build an international group where you have people in England, you have people in Australia. It's not uncommon that I'll be broadcasting, and there's people from England coming in and people from Australia coming in and all other places, and you're like, we are instantly international. It's so
remarkable.
So it's, work on building connections with the people in other countries, because those also really help for that international bestseller stuff. It's having those.
It does.
You have those connections in all those places, and doesn't take a lot of people. So it's well worth your effort to do stuff like that.
So Bruce, what would you say for somebody that's just starting out on this journey? Because it's a big journey. It takes a lot of time and effort to bring a book to the world, especially one well written. I've picked up books. I've had people speaking from the stage, and you got to get my book. And oh my God, you look at it and go, who did this book? It's a walking advertisement. This is not how we do this. What would you say to somebody thinking about starting this process? Yeah.
So I would have a couple points. One is start building what in publishing is called your author platform. And that is, so your author platform are your friends and family, your coworkers, your Facebook friends, Twitter friends, anybody in your email list, your blog, and just followers and people that follow you. So that's really important, because that'll come into play later on. Those are the people that will help buy you. So it's worth your effort to sort of have some platforms online to kind of start to build those people and give them a place to connect with you. So that's a key, and that can be started today. Whether you're going to. Yeah,
I usually tell my authors, start the minute you put pen to paper is when you start.
Yeah. Pen to paper is definitely, and some of those will be more important than others. Your Twitter followers, maybe not, but depending on your market, it can be like, I work with this site called Gumroad for selling a lot of my products. And the people that are hugely successful there are the people who, some of them are the people who write on technology. They write software books and things about that. Those are Twitter people. That's where they hang out. So you want to be in the places where your audience hangs out. So getting that platform starting. The second thing I talk about is the world needs to find your content, and so start spreading your content. So if you have published your book or you're getting near there, you have written a lot of content, and to put that out in small chunks through, I recommend a blog or a website, something kind of permanent, but push it out to the world. And that's fueling the Google engine. So you're trying to get Google to see your things, because people search for solutions to problems, and you may offer that problem. You can take the content from your book and spread it. I've used this method as my most successful method for promoting my books. Whether it's I take the images, I take the text, I put it on websites and blogs that I control. Around that, I will put ads for my books. I put little ads, little thumbnail ads. So Google brings them. They go, oh, that's cool. That answered my problem. Oh, good. He has a book. So that's so number two would be to take that content that you put up and use the social media platforms to spread it. So some things are more permanent. YouTube's and your blogs and stuff like that stuff will be up for years. Facebook, it's up for maybe, and Twitter, it's for seconds, but they do connect with people. So that's sort of cross promote that material. And then you want to look for many ways to sell. Becky highlighted a whole bunch. It isn't just your book. It's what else can your book do? And so when I wrote this book, which is my newest book, I built checklists into this book that I knew I was going to take out later and turn them into lead magnets or giveaways or free PDFs. I had control at the beginning of writing the book to know all right, just this is the section I'm going to use this later. So you want to think sort of that kind of stuff. But and we've talked a bunch here about different ways of putting your books in the back of your book, using video. You're not just using Amazon. And then the last one, and I think this is one of the ones I see a lot. I see this so many times in my How to Publish group, is that people don't give their audience an easy way to buy the book. Like, put the link in. They'll show the book. Hey, it's my new book. But there's no way to buy it. And that fits. Somebody will talk about their book. It's not selling. I'll go, all right, let me see your website. They have a website. They have a little author website, a blog. But why isn't the book on the front homepage? Why isn't there a book page? There's no reference that you have.
No landing page, no nothing.
Landing page. There's nothing, like just make your book current and popular. And so making it easy to buy. It's hard. We don't want to go, buy my book, buy my,
yeah, it's difficult. But there's some of the other things. That I talked to be heard. There we go. Talk about. I encourage them to read little clips of their book on social media. Do some lives, reading. Invite people. Start a Facebook author page and invite people into that and start engaging in the conversation, or LinkedIn, wherever your audience is. Engage in the conversation. Ask questions. Read your book, pieces of your book aloud. Show the images that you're using. Talk about your process of, maybe you're I need inspiration.
When I released this, I did a 4-day challenge about the book, and all I basically did was took the 4 core chapters at the center of the book, and I just taught the chapters. And what were my bullet points? Well, they were the subtitles from the chapters. Like, I was very easily able to put together a presentation. I said, okay, day one was on using your book's content. I just took the subchapters, titles, and just those are my bullet points. I had just written the book. I knew the content, and I took some of the illustrations from the book and just added them in. And I did that for the 4 days and just taught basically I taught the core center of the book as the launch. One of the questions that does come up is people, well, what about fiction? I have fiction. How am I going to deal with that? Says, you're not teaching anything. My suggestion in that was to teach or show the world around your fiction, like build the world or environment of your book. So maybe
showcase your
characters, or you might even be maybe you're writing a fiction on 19th century romance. Well, talk about the town that you're sort of centering in, talk about the fashion, talk about the food they ate, your characters. You can build a world, go find videos on, Scotland or whatever it is that you're doing, and incorporate those into your world and be sort of a central place around 19th century romance books or whatever your topic is. So you don't have to, have concrete things in your book. You can find other things in the world that relate to that.
There's so much that can be done, and it's such a beautiful tool and resource that we have. We have so much that we can do with this. But if you engage, you start early. You start during your writing process of making sure your social media looks branded. Does it have the same look and feel as your website? As all the way along, because it's the branding part of it that will connect for people. They'll see you on LinkedIn. Oh, I think I saw that person on Facebook. How interesting. So you have the same look and feel across all your media, so that people, and so we can do these things, but start now in the process.
Right. The other thing that I did, it's one of the tips that I have in my book, but I talk about is once your book is released, go back and look through all of your bios, your social media bios, your Facebook, your Twitter, your website. Maybe you are an attorney or a lawyer or a professional person and you have a page on your company's website. Go back and look at all those and add in, Bruce Jones is the author of, Bruce Jones, the author of, is a graphic designer, blah, 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 blah. And I hadn't done this for a while, and I realized that some of my bios were way out of date. They were like from my previous address or where I had worked or at something. And so it's just a good thing to periodically go and look at all of those connection places, because people, if they're interested in you, will go dig you out. They will go and look.
That was from another life.
It's like, oh,
yeah,
so
cutting in and out, unfortunately.
Yeah. The Amazon Author Central.
That's
go ahead.
One territory. Yeah, sorry about that. We keep cutting in and out, so I don't know what's happening here.
Well, one of the important thing I was going to say was, make sure you have an Amazon Author Central page, which is free to every author when you publish your book, but it's also where Amazon pulls your bio from. So if you'll notice your bio, so I will go into my bio there and change to whatever is the latest book I'm doing, because people, if your bio doesn't relate to that book that you're currently promoting, it's promoting a different book. So it's going to be wrong on all your other books, but at least it's correct for the book that you're currently working with. And so it's an easy thing to sort of fix and check. So.
Well, for those that are listening, thank you for being with us here today, or that will listen in the future. But the whole purpose of Spotlight Studio is to bring authors a wealth of tips and techniques that we can keep our books out to the world, how to write a good book and get it out there. The tools that we have available to us. Our next author on Friday at 9 a.m. Mountain Time will be Robert W. Jones and Dr. Karen Perkins. They wrote a big book called The Art of Connection, 365 Days of Networking Quotes. And then we'll be interviewing expert John McGrath, who brings to us the 6-minute webinar. And the 6-minute webinar is designed around getting very concise with your message, because we find that people that have to sit for hours and hours to listen to a webinar and wonder what the point is of this, they teach you how to get it so concise, down to the point, so a person knows whether they want to continue on and learn from you.
Right.
And so as the weeks go by, we will be showcasing multitudes of authors and multitudes of experts, and we will be having Bruce back because we have so much more to talk about. So thank you for the time today, Bruce. This was an interesting, fascinating conversation, and I hope for you listeners that you feel welcome to reach out to myself or Bruce, and he has the Sell Your Book Challenge down below. It's been scrolling across, and I usually remove the scroller, but I got engrossed in the conversation. But thank you for being with us today, Bruce, and keep doing what you're doing. You're awesome.
All right. Thank you, Becky.
All righty. Thank you.